Hey, welcome. If you're listening to this, this is the Dr. Zero Trust show or podcast or whatever the hell this thing is that I do. I've got some folks here from Opsin, which is a pretty cool name for a company. James Pham and Oz Wasserman, which I know Oz for a little while. He's a super nice guy. James is pretty new to me, but he seems like a nice fellow. He looks like he's at least taken a shower in the last couple of days or whatever. So why don't you guys do a quick intro and sort of talk about who you are, where you are, and what you do?
Awesome. So yeah, I can get started. Thank you, Chase. It's been a pleasure knowing you so far, obviously, and doing this. So I'm one of the founders here in charge of product at Opsin. My background is mostly in security. I was a security engineer in Israel, and then did product management and engineering positions, mostly on the security vendor side. So I started at FireEye. I moved to Abnormal Security, where James and I actually worked together in the product team, and then worked also with a startup called Rico AI. Most of my experience and background is around data security, data governance, and securing SaaS applications as well as email. And just excited to chat with you, Chase, and with the audience around what we're trying to do. To
Yeah,
you, James.
cool. James?
Yeah, pleasure to be here, Jay. So my background is in AI and machine learning. It started way back before GenAI was cool. When I was at MIT, I taught a few classes on machine learning, and after MIT, I've been working in the Bay Areas for different AI and ML um, products. I was at Abnormal Security, responsible for their ML platform teams, and that's where I met Oz, who is on the security side. And even before I start my own company with Oz, I actually was head of product for a Series A company focusing on decentralized AIs. So I have been, on AI and ML for quite some time now.
Super. So obviously, being MIT and Israeli cyber side, you guys know what you're talking about. So let's let's define the AI thing because that's where usually I think this immediately goes off the rails, right? Is AI? You say AI, and people start thinking about HAL and Terminator and all this other crazy stuff. Whatever. We're talking specifically about generative AI, which is define that for the audience, if you will, or just like give us some grounding of what the AI is that we're talking about as far as the security side of things. Either one of you, James or Oz, please just chime in and tell us where we're wrong.
Yeah, definitely not something that's scary as Terminator for sure. Um, AI and machine learning actually have been around for quite some time, probably decades old. Right? Like the thing that you see on the recommendation engine, or like things that you see, it's very prevalent in the ANML world, and that would be considered more like a traditional um, AI and machine learning, where there's an input, you predict what the outcome look like. What really new recently is generative AI. So it's basically a type of AI that can create new content like text, images, video, and audio. So GenAI model can learn like patterns and structures of their training data, then produce a new data based on these patterns. And the most famous one is probably ChatGPT, where it basically ingests the entire text corpus of the internet, train on it, and now you can interact with it and ask it questions. And in the context of a lot of enterprises nowadays, most people are just focusing on, how do I adopt Gen AI and how do I do it securely? And of course, traditional artificial intelligence and machine learning is always there and will continue to be there. But this is just the new type of AI that emerged in probably 2 or 3 years now.
So are we just because you're talking about it? Are we at a stage with AI now where we're basically commoditizing this thing? Like AI, as we know it, kind of shows up everywhere. But is it just the data side of it, or are we seeing this play itself into other areas of tech? I mean, obviously there's the deep fake stuff and whatever else, but when we're thinking about generative AI, like how big is generative AI?
It's it's going to as big as the internet itself, in terms of the impact it's going to have on human society in general. You think about it, right? Like the internet kind of enable a lot of people to get connected, And then you got like all this cloud wave where there's new sort of enterprise software. Now people can start deploying their application and interact it from like a tiny devices like mobiles and so on. So generative AI is the new wave of technological evolution that help human to become more efficient, more effective, and can kind of like help human being to keep kind of be a lot more productive. Um, and of course, there is a positive side of Gen AI, but then also like the negative side, like what you talk about with regard to deepfake, scam, and all this stuff, right? Like, so every new technological wave, there would be that dark side of human being, right? Like, same with like the internet, like when it first got started, people was like trading drugs and marijuana and all the things. Now it's just like very safe and secure, and it's just like a journey we all have to go through.
Yeah, now you just go buy your weed at the weed store. But anyway, that's a longer story. So Oz, let's talk about how Opsin is doing what it's doing and like what that means in the context of zero trust and security and generative AI. Like you guys are building and launching this thing. What is the value proposition?
Yeah, absolutely. So referring back to what James was saying, right? The generative AI kind of emerged in the last 2 to 3 years, and every technology that emerges, whether if it's cloud or the internet, generative AI, it's its own what we call a technology stack. So obviously there is components to it. You connect your organizational information in the form of data to get productivity gains, right? But the moment you want to do something meaningful with generative AI is the moment you truly have to what we call ground it to have context to your organization, which means you have to connect the data, you have to connect your files, you have to connect your CRMs to be able to have your employees ask questions, get the productivity gains that they need. But that also opens up a risk, right? It opens up the risk of who can actually access that information through generative AI, right? If you think about it, you ask questions, you get the answers. But if your data that you're connected to generative AI is not really secured from the first place, then generative AI, as much as it's powerful for productivity gains, it's also very powerful to search for information that actually beforehand was actually much harder to find. So it's just a question away, right? So for us at Opsin, our value proposition is really to help you connect your sensitive data securely and continuously assess whether an employee from any type of department should or should not interact with the data. And just to summarize, in the context of zero trust, once you know exactly who asks the question, you can enforce who can actually get and retrieve that information through generative AI. And in the context of zero trust, you always have to remember you have to engage the least amount of information for people in order to really keep that secure. Because again, just restating that, generative AI is a very powerful tool that can have some security implications to it as well.
So is this a way of sitting like as a proxy between generative AI applications and infrastructure? Or, I mean, how, like, I guess somebody would probably say, well, Swig or Casby or whatever else could kind of play in that space, but there's a nuance to this that you guys are kind of solving for that people aren't thinking about.
Yeah, and I can expand a little bit more on that. That because of how generative AI is architected, and that's where the nuance come from, and all these traditional security solution like Caspi that you mentioned, um, is not able to protect organization from that. So let me take a step back and kind of expand a little bit more on the generative AI architectures. So the reference that Oz mentioned earlier about like connecting organization data to generative AI is actually called retrieval augmented generations, or it's called RAG architectures. So essentially what it is for a lot of like big model out there like Llama 3 or like OpenAI or like Cloudy or Anthropic, they are trained on generic data set that is available on the internet. And it's not very helpful for enterprises, right? Because there is proprietary data that reside within the enterprise's environment that the GenAI do not get access to. So there's no way it can know about the data. Then the second thing that people usually go is GenAI model usually have a cutoff day, which is the training day that is the Gen on. So what happened is, let's say the election in November, there's no way that GenAI can know. So what happened is they have this rack architectures that can go and fetch latest information or latest kind of or like a private proprietary data within the enterprise environment. So what that means is that now when you connect your data to generative AI, basically that GenAI application now get access to all of your underlying data that you connected to it. So think about tools like Clean or Microsoft Copilot or Google Gemini. Now it gets access to all of your documents instantly.
So it's like, yeah, it's like a rat's nest. It's data upon data upon data upon data, and it's way further back into the infrastructure than people are giving it credit. Is that pretty fair?
Yeah, that's a fair kind of statement. And what that means is tool like Gatsby would not be able to catch that because it's just like a communication between the two layers within your same environments. So what that means is that now as a user, if I got authenticated into the GenAI application, I can certainly ask all the questions that the GenAI application get access to. And that's a very dangerous thing, as you can imagine. Like in enterprises, they have very stringent data control, and that's one of the biggest thing that is the new risk with generative AI.
Yeah, because that's one that's been sticking out to me a lot is like you've got all these healthcare organizations. I mean, the last time I did the Department of Veterans Affairs had me do a full body MRI. They gave it to me for free, but the deal was we can use your images to train our models. I was like, sure, I could care less, whatever, go ahead. However, I'm fully aware that that data is probably going to get compromised, and I'm also fully aware that there's layers of that data that's inside of the VA that talk about my social security number and my Department of Veterans Affairs thing and whatever else. So it definitely makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up that this is being used literally to train a generative AI model, but the VA is the one that's actually taking care of it. So how would we describe the for the non-cyber people like Oz, where would we say this is a fix or this is a problem that has to be taken care of now? Is it a compliance requirement specifically, or is it this is you need to do it because of security purposes? Like, how are you talking to people about the side of the use case here?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in most of our customer engagements, we see a lot of organizations do what we call enterprise search. So James talked about, Glean, for example. Glean's a company that provides a generative AI application to do enterprise search. And the problem there is, as much as this tool is powerful, then the entire information of the organization is just in your hands. It's just a question away. So for your question around, where do you guys just see the value, whether if it's compliance, whether if it's risk? So it actually is a multi-dimensional risk, right? So for example, if I go to Glean, if I'm an insider, intentional insider that wants to get information that I shouldn't get access to, Glean or Copilot or these tools are great because we all know that data governance, as much, as organizations try to do that, there's always going to be misconfigured data. There's always going to be overshared data in an enterprise. So if I'm an insider, there's an insider threat that I could just question Glean about specific files, specific document. What's my CEO salary? What's going to be the board notes for next week's board meeting? So a lot of these things can actually be much more accessible with generative AI, which opens up risks like I said, insider risk. Think about regulated data, right, that I can search for, that includes, for healthcare organization, private health information, credit card information, you name it. I think just to restate what I've said before, the fact that we connect the organizational data to generative AI is very powerful for productivity, but it makes much more of an accessibility to the information that beforehand I had to go and really, really search deeply for it until I get access to it. Now it's just a question of it.
Yeah, it used to be you had to know how to write regexes and you had to do some of the other stuff, and you would sit there and build that stupid regex for half an hour and you run it and you get no results and you're like, oh crap, I had a period out of place, and you start over again and it goes. Now you just go, hey, tell me about all the credit card information in database X, and everything you ever wanted to know comes vomiting back to you. So when you're talking to like potential clients and customers, where are they putting this into their security stack or budgeting for it or whatever? Because the common problem now is like, oh, I don't have any more money. I've already got all the security stuff in the world, blah, blah, blah. How are you getting them to get the point across that this is something they have to take care of? And where do they pull budget from?
Yeah, the budgeting question is an interesting one, right? Because a lot of organizations nowadays, actually, I remember just reading a survey last night on like where the budget come from, and most of them actually had net new budget for Gen AI specifically. Despite all the cost cutting measures in the technology world that we are seeing, a lot of organizations are worried, afraid that they might be lagging behind others in the industry. So there's a lot of new budget that are being created for adopting Gen AI, either for productivity purpose or like for incorporating Gen AI in their product stack itself. So that one source of the budget. And then the second source of budget that I've seen people are doing is that they usually have some sort of like IT budget, existing IT budget, and they would repurpose it.
But then,
So
are you having people too that argue like around? Because I always do these engagements with people, and you get 10 of them in a room, and you got the identity folks and the network folks and these guys over here and whatever. Somebody's going to say that's an identity problem, and somebody else is going to go, oh well, that's a web app problem, and then somebody's going to say, oh, that's a compliance issue. Like in the enterprise where you're talking about this is kind of the real risk. Like, is there a particular group you're starting to see that is typically saddled with taking care of this, or is it
yeah,
kind of just security writ large? Because I could kind of understand an argument about like maybe it's a web app or identity side of the equation, but
yeah, usually that when we talk to people, folks and companies, like the persona, so like the stakeholders that we interact with the most is the CIO or the CISO. Um, and within that, they do the balancing act, like what you said, identity folks, web app folks, is compliance issue. So that's the the juggling that they have to do internally to figure out like, okay, where is the budget coming from? But generally, the budget usually sit with the CIO or the CISO. Is the two of dominant stakeholders that we deal with, for budgeting specifically.
and so following on to that, like Oz, is the use of something like Opsin? We dropped Oz. He'll come back in a minute. I'll just edit that out. But anyway, so James, when we're thinking about generative AI, it's pretty easy to use and to kind of bring in. How is the use and onboarding of a system like Opsin in that context? Is it just turn it on and it starts figuring it out, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's literally like what you said there, which is that there's some API integrations that need to happen, and then we can, start monitoring the system, like things like Clean or Copilot, and we can highlight, where's the area of risk look like for organizations, and we can help them to remediate and kind of fix the issues before it becomes like a big problem. But in terms of like integration wise, it's super easy to get started, right? Like you can just like give us the API key, we integrate with it, and we'll give you access to a portal where you can look into all the risk and you can remediate it.
Okay, that's cool. Because yeah, that's the last line in the problem space for any tech nowadays is, how much of a ass pain is it for me to make this thing work? And if it's just, like turn it on and hook up some APIs and start working from it, I don't think there's a valid argument that it's problematic. Oz, on the customer side of this equation, is this specifically for kind of enterprise, or do you see this also playing in small and mid-sized business, or how is that ecosystem going to play out here? Because usually with newer things, it's big business, enterprise, government first, and then little folks later on. But I mean, anybody anywhere can have generative AI applications in use today. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what Microsoft, for example, is doing in that front, right? Because your thought is right. When we started Opsin, we saw a lot of organizations just doing a lot of generative AI work as more of a build exercise. So they'll build their own things, they'll use the tools. And if you really think about it, that like is the tech first enterprise that has the capacity to build something. But then you have tools like Copilot, like Glean, like Copilot Studio. And what it means is that it gives you the infrastructure to build in generative AI, even if you don't have the technical staff to go and build that from the ground up. So it's more of a no code, low code approach to generative AI. And it's as much effective as the open source tools. So bottom line, what it does, it actually, it doesn't have to be now the tech first enterprise with the engineering workforce. It can be a lot of organizations that want to gain the productivity and are using the Microsoft suite, whether you're on E3 or E5. And then also we see small startups. So basically like these organizations and companies like Microsoft and Glean, and now Perplexity, they're able to give you the infrastructure to build. So we see it across the board, actually.
So yeah, I mean, I think this is obviously a global issue, and it's gonna. And I mean, the other thing that's interesting too is you don't even see what you would typically consider to be like mega breaches of major businesses anymore, enterprises, because they've done an okay job at kind of taking care of themselves. However, it's all of the vendors, third parties, resellers, all those other little folks that are plugged in there that are causing these things. Now with this generative AI stuff, I mean, you want to throw some gas on a fire, like that's a whole lot of gas on a whole lot of fires that's burning at a really high rate. I think that this is super interesting. So kind of last couple things here. Where do you see the market for this going over the course of the next few years? And is there anything, in particular that you would tell folks to pay attention to or be aware of in the context of generative AI and security or zero trust? Either one of you, James or Oz, go ahead.
Yeah, I think in the next few years, like this generative AI system is going to become much more complicated, and the adoption is going to be a lot more. When I said complicated, meaning that now the agentic workflows start taking a hold, right? Like there will be like a supervising agents that coordinate all the tasks for sub agents who can go on and do fetching the data, doing tasks and other things. So what that means in that context in the next few years is that the chance of oversharing or exposing data inadvertently with one of these sub agents is going to be a much bigger risk. And then the other thing is with regard to the adoption piece that I mentioned. Now right now you kind of like go down a tree with someone who like very technical. Now with the Microsoft Copilot and Glean, it's become less technical. And I could imagine in the next few years, it could just make it so easy that everyone get access to generative AI in one form or another. So with that being said, like for audience who listen to the podcast, I think it is important for you to kind of stay alerted in this latest development, especially when it comes to like not just like how it helps you, but also like how you protect yourself from the negative side of generative AI. Just like what happened with the cloud, what happened with the internet. So staying up to date on this is going to be critical for you to safely adopt generative AI and get the positive benefit that you want, but also kind of negate the negative effect of generative AI.
And I actually want to add one more thing in the context of zero trust. James really talked really well about how the space is going to go to this multi-agentic world. But for the audience here that is interested specifically on zero trust, just remember, like any other technology that emerges, when you have zero trust principles in your organization, you have data security and governance policies, don't think they are automatically being applied to generative AI when you're actually going and building, whether if it's Copilot, Glean, or you build your own application. These concepts, whether they live in your data governance program, they're great, but they need to be applied and enforced in generative AI to any shape or form. So that's very important to highlight. Opsin is one of these companies that can help you with that, but just bear in mind that it's very important as you advance with these really amazing emerging technologies, you stay very informed, stay very close to the zero trust principle.
So, all right, folks. So it is October of 2024, and we've got James and Oz here, and I want to like put a line in the sand. Remember years ago when everybody was telling you like internet was going to have risks associated with it, and then everybody was telling you cloud was going to have risks associated with it, and everybody just kind of blew them off, whatever else. And here we are trying to deal with it. 2024, James and Oz from Opsin are saying, pay attention to what's going on with generative AI. It's a risk. There's potential threats there. Be ahead of it. Be aware of it. So if you're out there and you're listening to this and you have questions, James was at MIT, so obviously he's got a 50-pound brain. Oz knows what he's talking about. If you're looking for problems or you're looking for solutions to this issue, reach out to the guys at Opsin. It's OPSIN. They can help you figure this stuff out. James, Oz, thank you very much for coming on here. I'll make sure I point people to your website and those things on the far end of this. But generative AI, folks, zero trust, security, like it's a thing. Be aware, get ahead of it, or you're going to deal with it on the far end. That's all there is to it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chase.
All right. Thanks, Chase.